years. I first met our presenter, Wally Fu, today in about 1990. While I don't remember the exact year, I do remember how we met. It was playoff time for Division III football, and I get a call from a person who introduced himself as Wally Fu. I didn't know any Wally Fu. But Wally, turns out, was a 1967 undergraduate chemistry major at St. John's University in Minnesota. Well, I was 5 years behind him. I was a 1972 John H. chemistry major. So we immediately had a lot in common, even though our times at St. John's did not overlap. So the call that Wally made was an invitation to join him at his house to watch the St. John's football team in a round of the National Division III football playoff that year. What made Johnny football special for us, Wally and me, and most anybody that went to St. John's, was that the coach, John Ghilardi, has the record of all-time winningest coaches in college football. All right, well, how did he do that? He coached for 64 years, 60 of them at St. John's. His teams had a record of 489 wins, 138 losses, and 11 ties. Just for a point of reference, since I'm a chemist, numbers are important. The next person on the list was Eddie Robinson at Grambling with 408 wins. And second or third on the list was Bobby Bowden at Florida State with 377 wins. Ghilardi had, 489. So he's quite a character. And I was the trainer for the football team for 4 years at St. John's. So I got to know Gag really well. And we can talk about Gag at the end, but right now I'm going to move and tell you a little bit about Wally. You want to talk about Gag?
No.
After graduating from St. John's in 1967, Wally completed his PhD in organic chemistry at Marquette University, followed by a postdoc in organic chemistry at Cornell. From 1981 to 1986, Wally was a project scientist at Union Carbide Agricultural Products. In 1981, he received the Union Carbide Outstanding Employee Award. A notable achievement, I'm guessing connected with that, was his work in the commercialization of larvicide pesticide that saved $43 million in design and construction of a chemical plant. That was $43 million back in 1981. And note that the tragic MIC incident Wally will discuss today was in December 1984 at a Union Carbide plant in Bhopal, India. So while Wally was not in India or connected with that, speaking with him this morning a bit, that was a reason that in 1986, he ended up with his position at Parke-Davis Pharmaceuticals here in Holland, Michigan. And so, and that was a notable achievement during his time at Parke-Davis was that his first appointment at Parke-Davis was development of peptide production plant that had a cost reduction of a factor of 10 in the manufacturing process. So, saving big bucks for Parke-Davis. And also, it turns out that during that time span, I had a sabbatical leave from Hope College at Parke-Davis. And so I got to see Wally fairly routinely at Parke-Davis. And so we continued our professional connections. And then in 1997 to 2002 at Parke-Davis, he had the position of peptide production manager and senior manufacturing associate. He was part of the team for the successful commercial launch of Lipitor, something I'm sure that many of you are familiar with, a statin that is medication to control lipid levels. And I believe with the non-patented product, that was the largest selling prescribed chemical in 2022, Lipitor and the variations on Lipitor. So, and then it turns out that my note here got crunched up. In 2002, Parke-Davis was purchased by Pfizer. All right, so guess what? Wally had a different hat. At Pfizer, he was the Pfizer technical lead, and he managed, coached, and mentored a group of professional scientists. Over the course of his time in that role, he saved over $7 million in improvements in various areas of manufacturing and testing. So Wally's really a good guy to have if you're interested in saving money. And also, I had the good fortune of having another sabbatical leave at Pfizer, former Parke-Davis facility, at the time, and Wally and I overlapped during that time, and we continued our professional connection and personal connection. So when the Pfizer facility closed in 2006, Wally already had a long, stellar career in industry. But it coincided with a time at Hope College when we were looking for additional instructional staff. It turns out I happened to be the department chair at the time and had the responsibility of filling these staffing needs. Well, who came to mind but Wally Fu? And so I talked to Wally, and it worked out really great. And so Wally ended up having a second career in academics, because for 7 of the following next 10 years, he taught chemistry at Hope College. And so it was my good fortune to know Wally, to have him to do that. So with respect to today's presentation, it is noteworthy that in 2011, he served as a consultant for the United States Chemical Safety Board regarding a 2008 MIC incident at Bearer production facility. And the recommendation of that board that Wally sat on was that the plant should be shut down. And in chatting with Wally briefly before this, he mentioned that his move from Union Carbide to Pfizer was very much connected with what happened at the Union Carbide plant in Bhopal. And Wally will say more about that. So in addition to his 3 US and 17 foreign patents, Wally appreciates the chemistry of cooking and fine wine. So with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Wally.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me okay? All right. That was a good introduction. I don't know what to say after this. I think I should just pack up and go home. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Very good. We're going to talk about the 40th anniversary of the Bhopal incident. But before we do that, we're going to go look back into some of the other things that happened at Union Carbide previous to that. So I'm going to go through most of that experience from my own background and other people telling me stories, and I can share those with you. December 3rd, 2024, but today is September 9th, 2024. So it's not today the 40th anniversary. It's another almost 4 months from now. Okay? And we will be telling you why. About 10, 15 slides down, I will tell you why I picked today. History of Union Carbide with the emphasis on APC. APC stands for Agricultural Products Company. And what is MIC? MIC is not MICKEY, okay? It's methyl isocyanate. What happened to the key players in the United States at Union Carbide? What happened to these guys that created this disaster or part of the disaster? And what's going to happen? What is happening now? Okay, the history of Union Carbide was 1886. It's called the National Carbon Company. Back then was the Niagara Falls used as a electrical generation from the hydroelectric power. And therefore, there's a lot of chemical companies formed. And Union Carbide was one of those companies. And by 1898, Union Carbide changed its name to UCC, or Union Carbide Company. And then it merged with another company called Carbon Corporation, and then become Union Carbide and Carbon Corporation. Then by 1920, the chemical division is formed. Don't worry about the next slide because this is the 10-year-old slide. I forgot to erase that, okay? 1939, they bought Bakelite. You guys heard about Leo Baekeland, who made these Bakelite combs and radio sets and so forth. And that's the company that was bought by Union Carbide. And then was renamed about that time to Union Carbide Corporation in 1957. 1958, the new insecticide 7 was introduced. Or in West Virginia, they would call it 7. In 1983, the next product was introduced by Lin Payne. Lin Payne was another chemist, 1963. And then 1975, Larvin, which is a third insecticide, was developed by a guy by the name of Themistocles de Silva. he is Indian, but from Goa. Therefore, he's got Portuguese blood. So that's why with a name like De Silva. I will show you a picture of him. You can tell that he is more Indian than Portuguese. And then Lavin was discovered by him in 75. That's when I joined the company. In 1981, I developed the commercial process for Lavin. So in spring of 1975, Professor Gerald Meinwald at Cornell connected me with his former student at Union Carbide, saying there's a job opening. Would you like to be considered? So I was offered a senior chemist position at Union Carbide at that time. And within 6 months, 2 people offered me opinions about Union Carbide. It's unsolicited. I can tell you what these 2 people, very important people to me. At least one of them is very important. It's my father. He said he worked for UCC in the 1930s in Tianjin, China. And my dad passed away in 1990. The Tianjin warehouse explosion happened on August 12, 2015. I will show you that later. Another person is Jerry Rausch, as a professor at La Crosse State University. I met him when I was teaching at La Crosse previous to going into graduate school. And he asked me, who's my boss? I said, John D. And Jerry warned me to watch out for this guy because he was celebrating and dancing when Kennedy was assassinated. So those 2 opinions telling me that I might be walking into a rat trap or snake pit. Okay. Now let's go back to APC, Agricultural Products Company. Now I'm going to show you what Union Carbide is like when I first joined. First, I don't think I'm going to wear this for very long. It's too hot. This is a jacket, which when I first joined the company, it was huge at the time, but today it's barely fitting me. Okay. I have been very prosperous, I guess. So this is a jacket. You see, it's a little tighter now. Right? It's a Union Carbide, Kanawha Valley. Have you heard of that word? Kanawha, or Kanawha. They say Kanawha if you live in West Virginia. There's Kanawha. Y'all know that? Yeah. Anyway, so I lived in West Virginia for a few years, and I was told, jokingly by friends, saying, if you want to return to them state of West Virginia, you got to keep your woman pregnant and don't buy shoes for your young'uns. Don't buy shoes for your young'uns. So I promptly followed that order and have 3 kids. And I lived in West Virginia for 6 years. And of course, Union Carbide was just a chemical company, but I was belonging to the agricultural products division. So this is the one that probably even tighter than the previous one. It said, yeah, it is tight. You can see that. It's a methyl carbamate. So that's indication of you're part of the agricultural division. And this is the cream of the crop. So you walk down in West Virginia, in Charleston, West Virginia, you wear a jacket like this. The banks would say, oh, we'll get you a bank and you could get toasters and all this stuff. Everybody is trying to get you to join them to take the money away from you. So that's Union Carbide. Okay. Now let's go on with the discussion about some of the problems. MIC, which is the bread and butter of Union Carbide, because they use that to make the insecticides. Without that material, making the insecticide would be more difficult. So Union Carbide developed a way of making it, and the byproduct is hydrogen chloride gas, and it's very corrosive, and most metal pipes used in production would corrode away. So they built 3 plants. Eventually was successful having a plant that would run. That was probably in the late 1950s when they built the 3rd plant and it ran. So this is how the reaction goes. Methylamine react with phosgene. That's, you heard of phosgene, right? The poison gas in the First World War. So you react that. The first time it does is it react with one of the hydrogens and one of the chlorines to form the HCl, and form a carbonyl chloride. And that one, you can heat it up again and form methyl isocyanate and another molecule of hydrogen gas, hydrogen chloride gas. So it's a very corrosive process. And therefore, it's hard to make. Now, at about the same time in the 1930s, there's a famous Black scientist by the name of Percy Julian. He studied physostigmine, which is another carbamate insecticide. This is the carbamate group here. This portion here is the natural product from this calabar bean. This kind of stuff, well, if you ingest it, you will get these, the symptom of carbamate poisoning, which is shrinking pupil, very sensitive to light, and diarrhea. So if you have an overdose of that, you could die. But they're not very poisonous because this interferes with the acetylcholine esterase in the human body for nerve system. Therefore, it will compete for that site in the nerve system. And therefore, it can kill insects because insects is nothing but nerves. But human, the nerves are more centralized. Now, these are the two guys, Percy Julian and Joseph Pecco, are the two guys in 1935 published the work. But that's from a academic standpoint, this is great. This is great work. People were studying all these fancy stuff about how to make it, the asymmetric centers and so forth. But to a production chemist or industrial chemist, they were looking at making compounds that will replace the old ones, like the good old products like DDT and fluorine. During the Second World War, we used DDT to kill mosquitoes because our GIs were, decimated by insects like mosquitoes, malaria. So this new product, plus another one called organophosphates, which is also a good insecticide, but it's more irreversible damage to nerves. Therefore, it's less desirable. But other companies are in that. For example, Roman Haas, a company in Philadelphia, was very famous for making a lot of phosphates. And they called them phosphate zombies. Like they use it so much in Egypt for cotton that even the buffaloes will stick from that. They lose their ability to walk. Even people were suffering from that. So those are the two new class of compounds. So how the 7 was developed, I can give you a quick example. This is Dr. Joseph Adams, was a chemist. And he told his technician, Pooch looked like a pooch. He was next door to me in the lab, and I saw he was in the 60s by then when I joined the company. And I looked at his face, I said, he looked like, what's the guy's name? Hoover. No, Herbert, the Hoover guy, FBI guy. Yeah, J. Edgar Hoover, looked like J. Edgar Hoover with cheeks hanging down. Yeah, so it was very different. So he told him, I said, go to the lab and take some 2-naphthol, which is this compound, 2-naphthol, and react that with MIC, an isolated product, and send it for testing. Pooch went into the lab and looked. He couldn't find 2-naphthol, but he found 1-naphthol. The reason 2-naphthol is carcinogenic and 1-naphthol is not. Nobody knew that at that time. That was back in the 1950s. So he took the 1-naphthol and reacted that, and voila, he made insecticides. So other people start to do the same thing. Propoxol, for example, Bayer Crop Science, make this thing here for bed bugs. This thing here is another carbamate. It's called furidan. That's used in rice to kill insects. It's FMC's product. Both have since been recalled for different reasons, okay? Now, another guy by the name of Lin Payne back in the 60s, 62 or 63, he discovered, he's a biochemist, so he really understood what's going on. He said, look at this molecule. This molecule is called choline. This is acetylcholine esterase. This is a thing that's between your nerve endings that helps you transmit impulse. He said, you can make something similar to that. This is called an oxime. This is called a thiol compound, methyl compound. He said, if I make this aldehydoxine, that will be similar to choline, and I can make a carbamate on this side. Maybe that would be a good insecticide. And sure enough, he did that. But before he could do that, he said, I have to make the starting material from scratch. So he started with isobutylene. A lot of you don't understand chemistry, but some of you probably will enjoy this. The isobutylene is here. You react with NaCl, nitrosyl fluoride. And it does addition across the double bond, forming an oxime on this side and a fluoride on this side. And then they treat it with methyl. And that replaced the chloride to form the desired product. And then he reacted that with MIC and formed Timic. Timic was the second commercially successful insecticide by Union Carbide. Both are coming from MIC. And the thing is, the compound here, MIC, the Timic is 17 times more lethal than sodium cyanide. LD50 is the lethal dose, 50% kill. It's about 17 times more lethal than sodium cyanide. Sodium cyanide is approximately, I think, 5 milligrams per kilogram body weight for a human. And this material is probably about 0.3, 0.4 milligrams per kilogram body weight. Very toxic. So when I work at the company, we are never allowed to handle this product. This is commercial product. Only people in the plant making it would do that. They have to go through special treatment, special shower afterwards to clean up. Because if you get it on your skin, you're going to have poisoning and you're going to be in the hospital. Anyway, unfortunately, on today, 55 years ago, which is September 9th, 1969, I was fresh in graduate school, studying, getting my PhD. And this guy, Joseph Adam, is one of the two people transferred from a TWA flight to take Allegheny 853 in Indianapolis, trying to get home to Charleston, West Virginia, early enough. And he perished in the disaster. And this one, name is Lane Payne. He also perished in that mid-air collision. So in 1969, Union Carbide went from two superstars making great strides into commercial development that died. So the company essentially was decimated. And for the next few years, they were bringing in new people. So by 1975, when I was interviewing, I was near the end of the wave of hiring. So I was one of the last hired person. I came in, and this is exactly 55 years, not 65 years, 55 years. I'm sorry, I have some typo here, okay? Now, let's go back to the carbamate insecticides. DuPont and Shell was very smart too. They said, you can make Timic, we can make something similar to that. So they made this different insecticide, again, using methyl carbamate. So MIC is needed. And this is called Lanate by DuPont or Nudrin by Shell Company. So this one is supposed to be a pretty good insecticide. Unfortunately, it could not be used on certain crops like cotton or soybean early on. If you use it too early, it defoliates and you can kill the plants. So you can use it just before harvest, defoliate, you can harvest. So cotton farmers will use it, a few days before harvest to defoliate the leaves so they can pick the cotton crop. So there's limited, it's only one use a season. And there comes Themistocles de Silva, author of The Black Box of Bhopal. Here's a book in case you guys are interested to see this book. You talk about dry chemistry here. This one is really dry chemistry. Okay. He said, oh, yeah, Lanate is out there. Let's go try some fancy stuff. He's going to put sulfur in there. He said, if we take two Lanates, two Lanates, how does that go? Okay, right here. This is lannate on one side. And here's another lannate. They're joined together at the sulfur, nitrogen, sulfur, nitrogen. So the two hydrogens on the nitrogen have been replaced with a sulfur. And he got the patent on that. At the same time, Shibagaki got the patent. And then I saw what was happening. The lawyers having a field day because Union Carbide submitted the patent application 2 weeks before Shibagaki submitted the US patent. But Shibagaki submitted that on the same day I started working at Union Carbide. December was on June 2nd, 1975. And Timothy Silver submitted his application about 2 weeks before the Shibagaki people. So after patent fight for a long, long time, they were playing the delay game because they were waiting for me to develop the product at that time. So they got, the patent life was extended by going for litigation, right? So eventually about 1982 or 83, finally we got the resolution on the patent. That Union Carbide owned the US patent, but Shibagaki owns the rest of the world. So very interesting, huh? Now, how did De Silva do his chemistry? He used MiC, hydrogen fluoride. For those of you who know hydrogen fluoride, it's a very dangerous compound. HF, it's like HCl, it's also gaseous, but it will dissolve concrete. It's that bad. So everything had to be done in plastic containers. You cannot use glass because it will eat glass. Then you react that with sulfur dichloride to form an intermediate called BCF, bis carbamium fluoride. So with sulfur is in there, the 2-methyl isocyanate with the fluorine now on the carbonyl groups. This is the intermediate owned by Bayer. Another way of making Larvin was using, this is the way, this is the way the reaction is converted from BCF. You reacted that with methyl oxime, then you end up with Larvin, okay? So that was the original development process early on. So we went to Bayer, and Bayer was willing to cross-lysing the BCF process to make Larvin in exchange for the MiC technology. The Union Carbide said, no way, we're not going to do that. It's corporate secret. Because we have monopoly on MiC, we're not going to share it with somebody else. So they refused that. They came back, and I was one of the 3 chemists assigned to find an alternate route. So I was a 3rd chemist, actually the last chemist of the 3 to join the group. So there was a process developed already at that time looking into making Larvin. So they take 2 molecules of methyl, the sulfur dichloride, and pyridine. And they got a 65% yield of Larvin in methylene chloride solvent because the solvent here is very good at dissolving all of the starting materials. So they react and form this, and you can just isolate it by using another organic solvent and methanol solvent and so forth. So that's more involved process. And it's not safe. It's not stable. The product explodes every now and then. One time I was traveling with an engineer coming out of Bound Brook, New Jersey. We were in Newark Airport. And this engineer was paged at the airport. And so he went to the, one of the phones to answer. And he said, you better come back to the plant right now. And he said, why should I do that? I said, did you see what's on TV? He turned around and saw this TV. There was a helicopter flying around at the Bound Brook Research Center, and people were building out of the windows. There was brown smoke coming out, and the material decomposed. He was doing a dryer test, and he dumped it into aluminum pail, and they probably react with the aluminum. Okay, so now I would like to have Mike pass out the little cheat sheet for you guys to think about. For those of you who cannot see me, people like on Zoom, here I'm going to just show you. It's a box. Okay. I'm going to put the box on the floor, open it up. I'm going to stand in there. I'm going to think. Can't think very well because I can't pace. But if I get out of the box, I can think. Oh yeah, I can think now. So you think outside the box. That's why I'm passing out this little slip of paper. You are supposed to do the following. Use 4 straight lines, contiguous straight lines on this piece of paper. So don't lift it off the paper, bunch it down on the paper. Draw so you can cross all eight dots in 4 straight lines. They can cross each other. Do I hear any winner yet? Oh, not all the players yet, okay. The challenge is to use 4 contiguous straight lines to cross on all 9 dots. The lines can cross. You have to think outside the box. No, contiguous lines. It's not separate lines. Contiguous lines. Yeah, you've seen this before. So this is called thinking outside the box. Let me see this one. Wonderful. Yeah. Raise your hand. Yeah, everybody else can see that? Yes, you got it too, yes. So I'm not the only one that's genius. So thinking outside the box is how you can solve problems. Yes. No, keep going down to here. Go straight. From there, go straight. Yeah, up, yeah, outside the box now. And then you go back this way. Then you go all the way. Yeah, no. Stop here.
Stop there.
And then go,
back.
yeah. See, got it?
Oh, yeah.
So this is called thinking outside the box. It's a way to solve a problem. So how do I think outside the box to fix this Slavic problem? At that time, the investment cost was $143 million, $142 million. I had to bring it down to less than 100 million. And the other 2 chemists, one saw the handwriting on the wall, bailed and went to Sandoz, which was a pharmaceutical company. The other guy just pretty much followed me along and became my assistant. I had about 15 labs at that time doing all these things, checking out, making sure everything is right. TLC test, but the TGA study, they got thermogravimetric analysis. So we did that already. I can tell you a little bit about what it's like at Carbide before we go on and talk about my problem solving. At Union Carbide in South Charleston, and I walk down the street into any merchant store, McClung Morgan furniture store, I walk into a hardware store. The moment they see a Union Carbide jacket, it's almost like you have an open book. You can buy anything you want. They'll give you extended credit and everything else. And for Carbide White, it's the same way. They are treated very well. The moment you said, my husband worked for Carbide, boom, everything is open up. The Carbide savings plan pays out every 2 years. And the merchants go crazy every other July because it's payout time. I remember the first payout, I had 1 year with the company, so I didn't have a big check like other people. And my wife already planned for the spending. She bought furniture, which lasted about 2-3 years, and then we threw them away. And then 2 years later, this time I got a big check. She went out there, and this time she bought some really fancy stuff, China cupboards and dining room set and fancy chairs. We still have those. Exempt versus non-exempt. Exempt would be people like me because I don't get overtime pay. I work 7 days a week, they won't pay extra. But the people who are working for me are hourly workers. If you ask them to stay at night and work, ask them to work up on the weekend, it's 1.5 times on, overtime more than 40 hours. If it is on Saturday, it's double time. Sunday is triple time. So they get pretty good compensation, but I don't get that. But when the company started to relocate us to the Research Triangle Park from West Virginia, because the company could not bring in good scientists to join, because a lot of people wanted to take jobs with the pharmaceutical companies in New Jersey or go to California, work for Silicon Valley companies. So they decided to move to Research Triangle Park, and only the exempt people were allowed to move. The non-exempt, yes, they can move, but the pay will stay the same. They will have to move on their own. I had assistance for moving. It was in 1981. At that time, interest rate for mortgage was 21%, and I got it for 14.5. And on top of that, they gave me interest differential. If it was higher than what I used to own my home when I had to buy a new house now in North Carolina. So they gave me a differential for 5 years. Every month I got an extra check. So all these things were to the advantage of the exempt people. And then the disadvantage is that we had to hire new chemists, new assistants. And all these guys are fresh out of college. And most colleges don't teach safety like industrial chemistry. So you end up with people who have very little knowledge about how to turn on the valve, how to turn on the valve when it's upside down. And sometimes you have to turn the valve upside down to use it because you have to mount it on the wall. That kind of stuff. Here's a picture of me with my older daughter. She was a year and a half old at the Union Carbide Sunday event, skating. So I would just fiddle around with my daughter, and the company photographer took a picture and put it in the Carbide paper. And this is probably about 1970. She was born in 78. So that's probably 79. Just about the time I was developing the new process. This one was taken in 1982. I moved to North Carolina already. By then we have 4 kids. My oldest one, this one here is a computer scientist. People know that, David will know. And this one here, today she's a director position at Harvard, teach the College of Arts and Sciences. And unfortunately, my younger daughter just got the notice about layoff. So she's now looking for a new job. And this little baby here, today he's 40. And his little girl is about this age now. Okay. So he's in Chicago. And of course, Mary Claire and me back there. That was before I still have hair. Okay. So this is living in Union Carbide, the events. Okay, now I'm going to tell you about outside the box story. How do you think outside the box? I was told that all carbamates are very unstable if there's transition metals around. So for those of you not chemists, a transition metal would be copper, nickel, chromium, iron, all these metals that's on the 3rd row of the periodic table. That's in the middle of the table that's expanded out. There's all these elements that are metal elements, usually used for construction of industrial equipment. And if you have any corrosion and these metals get into your product, it would destabilize the product. So I said, maybe I have something like that in my product. So I asked my technician, take methyl and dissolve it in a solvent, which is methanol, and filter out the insolubles, and it was iron. He got the sample to me. He said, this is 1 pound, which is 450 grams. Filter that, dissolved, filter, and left behind is some grayish material. We put it in a little glass vial, and they put a magnet underneath it, and it started to dance. Iron. How do you remove the iron? Well, I can use pyridine as the solvent instead of just the base. So I can overwhelm that, because pyridine and iron, they're very good. One accepts electrons, the other one donates electrons. Pyridine's got 2 electron pairs that can donate. So they would complex with the iron and then remove it in the process. Maybe that would stabilize the product. I have no proof at that time. So I did that experiment. And sure enough, it was a good product. It was stable, did not decompose. And the yield was really high, 80-some%. So, and then the next question I had to ask is, can I recover the purity? Because pyridine is not a cheap solvent. Because I'm using about 14, 15 times the level of the previous process. So we did a rough calculation, is that 92% recovery, then I'm breaking even. So we did that. 92% will make the process competitive to the old process. My process said we have 98% recovery efficiency. We use that pyridine back into the front of the process. So the makeup is only 2% every pass. So it's very low consumption of purity. The new process has no methylene chloride. And methylene chloride is a low boiling solvent. It's hard to recover. You have to use refrigeration, so it's expensive to do that. So we remove all that stuff out. Toluene is no longer used in it. Again, we can remove all that, save a lot of money on recovery. The yield increased by 20%, which is icing on the cake for us. And we're already breaking even at 65%. So now the investment dropped by $43 million. This is how I solved the problem. Replacing the pyridine, this is pretty much repeat of what I just said. Okay, and this product is stable. So 1981, the Union Carbide consolidated the F products to the Research Triangle Park, and I moved, and I lived in Chapel Hill, of all places. Raleigh, Durham, or Chapel Hill. I lived in Chapel Hill, and I was enjoying a lot of pampering. They treated me like a king. So I was living high in the cloud, and then of course the sky fell off. It changed on December 3rd, 1984, when I got into my carpool that Monday morning, and the three guys did not greet me at all. They were listening to the radio about a gas leak in Bhopal. I knew right away it's time to get out. Okay, so after I left, I changed the green coat. This one has many uses. This is a Park Davis coat. Okay, Frank used to work with me, so he would know this coat has got Park Davis logo on the front. In the inside, you can see the Park Davis logo much easier. Okay, so this is the Park Davis logo, and I don't fit this one either. This is 38 years ago, I think, 35 years ago. Oh, I still fit. Look at that. So anyway, so that's what it is all about. I think we should talk about this already. And I left John Park Davis, 1986. I was here. Well, what a good company. They have all these consumer products. So I learned a big lesson. Park Davis is worth a lot more money than that. But in 2000, I checked online. They had 1.15 million pounds of lavin produced, and is used in at least 3 major crops: cotton, sweet corn, and soybeans, plus a whole bunch of other minor crops. So that's a fairly significant amount of product they were selling at that time. This is 20 years ago. Okay. Union Carbide Limited in India. What causes the problem? It's because the cultural difference. The Indian culture is not the same as American culture. I was abhorred of some of the behavior they have. I have an Indian postdoc. He came to me and working for me. I told him, you need to handle MIC in the hood, and you need to leave your fan running all the time when you're using MIC in the open. And he sure enough weighed out everything carefully to the 2 decimal places. I told him there's 15 milliliters. So he calculated how many milligrams is involved. Then he turned off the exhaust fan so he could weigh it inside the hood without disturbing the balance. And I said, you're not supposed to do that. He said, but I can't get a good reading. Look, this, I told you 15 milliliters. I didn't put down 15.000 milliliters, right? So you got to understand. So when it can convert it to weight, and he had to go to 2 or 3 decimal places. UCIL offered tax incentive to the CEO of Union Carbide to move MIC production to India. At the same time, I was told to develop a new route to the carbide made so that we don't share the technology with the Bay of Crop Science. So we provided a corporate secret, the UCIL, Union Carbide India Limited, UCIL. And then they built a plan totally out of spec. They took out all the safeties, they built a plan, and it did not work. They hit the switch, nothing worked. And so they called the New York office, told the CEO and said, hey, the West Virginia people gave us bad technology. It didn't work. The CEO jumped all over us when providing wrong technology. You can't argue with him, right? So we sent half the team to India from the West Virginia plant and brought the Indian operators to the US, trained them here how to operate it. And when the team went to India, they found out that they removed all the safety. They changed the specification of the equipment. So the equipment making MIC is no longer compatible with the process because the way to build this is a corporate secret. They share that with the Indians. They took it out as too expensive to do. They put different equipment materials in there. So that's how the Indian did that. Okay, American management took over the West Virginia, from West Virginia and went there in the late 1970s. The Indian operator sent to the West Virginia for training. And then about 4 years later, 1981, UCIL ousted the American management, citing high cost because they paid them American dollars. Threw them out. They said, we'll run it. 3 years later, the incident happened. And when Union Carbide built a plant in India, it was in the middle of nowhere, 11 miles away from civilization, at a princely estate. There's a big lake, so they can use the water for cooling. It's in the middle of India, so it's a very hot area. To cool, you need a lot of water to cool the reactors. So within the time they built the plant, all the squatters came in to live around the plant. The plant manager said, we can't let the people live near the plant because it's dangerous. The Indian government said, this is a free country. They can live wherever they want. On top of that, if you make a product like, insecticide, it's good for the plants, will be good for the people. That was the argument. So Union Carbide built a fence around the plant. Ah, what a wonderful thing. The squatters now have a support wall. They can build against it and live underneath it. So this is how the people settle in the area. A newly installed Union Carbide president in the United States was a no-nonsense, kill the messenger type. If a messenger delivered bad news, he's gone. He went to Ambler, Pennsylvania, and there was an explosion. So isn't that a message from God saying something might go wrong? And the same guy went to UCIL in 1980. While he was there, this same president had another accident. This time it was a fatal accident. An operator died. Okay. And then the Gene D, this is a chemist, he became the new director of R&D. So he went to visit Bhopal and was called a very bad man because my postdoc from India said, oh, you're a director, very bad man, very bad man. So what did he do? He cornered every woman in the office. These are secretaries, typists, and shook their hands. And in India, you don't touch a woman in public. Only person that can touch a woman is the infant that she's carrying in public. So this is culturally unacceptable. And that's why the Indian postdoc told me Gene is a very bad man. Okay, so now Herb Morphew is another Union Carbide corporate research fellow. He went and talked about TIMIC proposal to pull out from Long Island because at one time there was a Charlie Moyer, a reporter, reported about TIMIC used on Long Island to grow potatoes and is causing a lot of groundwater problems because the TIMIC was in the groundwater. People were drinking well water would get the TIMIC, which I don't think is really a big situation because if they get poisoned by TIMIC, they'll be dead, right? Because they're so poisonous. Anyway, Herb said we should just appease the public by pulling the product out and then reintroduce back into Long Island afterwards. But he was shouted down by the vice president with obscenity, everything else. You can hear it. And then the next week, everybody in the company heard about that. And Herb Morphew was a corporate fellow. Within 5 years, he was demoted down to my rank, which is like 6 ranks down. And then he was forced into retirement. So this is how they treat messengers. And guess what? What Herb Morphew suggested about doing was precisely what they did to reintroduce the product back to Long Island. Contractor mistreatment. At RTP, there was a contractor, he was misused by the site manager. So it got into a big fight. And it was just email and printed messages handing out in the middle of the day. You see all these things at lunch break, and you see that. You go into work and you see that somebody passing out pamphlet, and a security guard comes out and just try to arrest the guy. He said, "You're not a police, you cannot do that." So unfortunately, we got all these things. We saw what was happening. It was a site manager was stealing from the company. Eventually, he was forced into retirement. So why they forced him into retirement? The guy was cheating, stealing from the company. Anyway, a friend of mine, Bob Moreland, had a spinal bifida son. And the child died about 4 or 5 months after he was born. So he went back to work. And his boss read him the riot act. How dare you slip off? You should not do this, you should not. I was really appalled when I heard that. It's unfortunate. The engineering department realized the problem about being a messenger of bad news. So the engineer went to present to those vice president and president level, telling them the larvae cost versus the competitor's cost. The competitor's cost is a pyrethroid on a certain crop, and compared to the Union Carbide product was 2 pounds an acre usage, while the pyrethroid was used at 1 ounce an acre. That's 1/32 of the cost of the amount needed. And the cost for pyrethroid was $80-some a pound. And the cost for larvae was $2.40 a pound. So in actuality, it's more expensive to use larvae than to use the pyrethroid. So the engineer only presented, this is how much dollar per pound. Didn't say about dollar per acre or how many dollars per acre. The management accepted that, approved it. Yeah, this is how business works. For those of you who are interested, this is a interesting fold in, fold out. Mad Magazine used to have those things, make fun of Playboy magazine. It's just you fold it in to say this is the original production design for waste treatment. You fold it in, there will be the Brown engineering change of proposal, and then you fold it in the second time, that become a UCIL treatment. By the time you fold it in, it's a toilet. Okay, so this is showing that the Union Carbide people were so much despised the UCIL people. While corporate culture was corrupt, corporate greed, clueless leaders. And then, of course, the most important part is the highly toxic production secret was given to irresponsible people. Some lessons learned. No one at UCIL plant died from the injury, or they did not die because they knew they should run upwind when the incident happened. So they were upwind while the other people were sleeping. It happened at night, about 11:30 or 12 o'clock at night. Warren Anderson, the CEO, purposely allowed himself to be house arrested so that when he was in Bhopal, he attracted the attention of the authority and the newspaper, why the team of Timothy de Silva went into Bhopal plant and grabbed samples and wrote this book. And 4 days later, Anderson got out from India. He just flew back, and he's still a wanted man. He's dead now. But this is how it is. The logbook of the day of the accident was torn off. Somebody didn't want people to see what was actually in the logbook. But we found out that there was between 500 to 1,000 gallons of water in the MIC storage tank when it took off. I mean, somebody purposely pumped water into the storage tank. And also the distillation of purifying MIC from the solvent, which is chloroform as a solvent, was not done correctly. They boiled really close to each other. So chloroform boils a little higher, so you have to go through a very careful distillation. They call it reflux to takeoff ratio, like 20:1. If you do it like a 3:1, that's what happened there. So you have a lot of chloroform coming over the head and into the tank. And chloroform is unstable. It reacts with the water, forms phosgene, and HCl generates from there because it's water. Hydrochloric acid, corrosion happens, and then the event happened at night. Okay, these head people, Warren Anderson, CEO, he had passed away. Robert Olford, the APC president, the guy who had all these explosions when he visited plants, he also passed away. Mr. McWhorter, he's the vice president. He was the vice principal in the school. He's retired. Well, at least 5 years ago, he retired. And Gene Burrows, the director of R&D, he also passed away about 12, 13 years ago. The current status of MIC, I'm going to show you the next one. August 28, 2008, there was an accident at the Bayer plant. Now, Bayer owns MIC in West Virginia. At the same site where Lavin was produced. Where Lavin was produced, something went wrong in the recovery tank of a waste recovery tank, and there was an explosion. The U.S. Safety Board hired me to evaluate it because I did the development of the process. And this is what happened. Pretty exciting here. This used to be a tank about this size. It blew away from the top. This is the column is still there, but everything else down here blew away. And 2 operators on top of the tank died. It was sent on top of the tank, according to my evaluation. I can talk now because 10 years ago when I was doing that, I was still under obligation not to talk about this for 3 years. Anyway, the 2 guys got sent to the tank to die when it's 130 degrees. And also Union Carbide in 1981, 82, studied this specific tank's content and saying that if you go to 130 degrees or higher, it's a runaway reaction. There's no return. This explosion happened. Okay, so I recommended they shut down the MIC unit, to shut down the Lavin plant. I don't care. Even though I was the one that developed the process, I don't care. The important thing is you don't kill people and you don't hide facts. So I say that. And Bayer eventually announced jointly with the Chemical Safety Board that they would shut down both operations, the MIC and the Lavin plant. And all my former co-workers at Union Carbide lost their jobs. And here's a picture of the inventor of Lavin, Tim De Silva, and that's me. This is one of the twin boys belong to him. This is his younger daughter, and he is a Catholic charity vice president in I think Cambodia. And she is a medical doctor at Duke and also an accomplished pianist and flutist. This family is amazing. And I follow them because this guy here gave me something to look forward to. I always wanted to connect back with him even after I left. So I went back and visited him many, many times since I left the company. I connect with him and then I heard from on the news that he passed away 4 months ago. So I wrote his daughter, Melissa, sorry, his daughter, she wrote back and said the father was very pleased that I would go back and talk to him and make connections and have closure, which is all about life, is have closure. You don't want to walk away with things hanging. So this is what I did. And the last thing I want to show is, I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back there to go back to the slide. How do you do this? Lower right-hand corner, okay. Okay, right there. There, okay. Now I can go play. I can hit play. I want to show you what happened in Tianjin.
Whoa! I'm videoing it. What the?
I think that might be a
This is the
gasification of a
acetylene explosion. It's just very bright light. You're not very explosive. But acetylene torch, calcium carbide, this releases acetylene. This is the calcium carbide my dad talked about. Now this one is different. Something that shook everything.
We're dangerous.
Not quite there yet. Now, this is the ammonium nitrate explosion. That's more forceful explosion. Tianjin, China.
Let's go, Cal.
This is where my dad stored the acetylene and calcium carbide electrodes. Okay, so no more ado, I'm gonna just quit. Okay, now this is the end of my talk. Do you have any thoughts? Please, you want to ask questions?
Okay, I'll
just
come
wait for
around with the
mic.
microphone.
I'm just trying to remember how many fatalities there were from that first original at Bhopal of the civilians. That was in the 3,000.
About 3,000 initial death. I think subsequently maybe another 2,000 or 3,000. But you know, in India, 2,000 or 3,000 is nothing. I mean, they have a train wreck. They have 10,000 people die. Fairly common.
And just as an aside, I used to teach on this topic for the nuclear Navy, and I had a book that was a kid's book for like a 9 to 12-year-old. It was a series on world disasters, and one of them was the Bhopal disaster, and it was illustrated. It wasn't photographs, it was illustrated, but there's like pictures of like people laying in the streets, but it's pretty good in terms of the detail. And
Yeah,
I just looked on Amazon. You can actually get it on Amazon. It's a kid's book, but it's pretty cool. I left it there when I left my job. So
okay, thank you. Yeah, we have gentlemen over here. Yeah, I thought you have a question. You have no question? Okay, that's okay.
I have a chemical question for
Yes.
you. You talked earlier about, early on in your discussion, you talked about controlling insects, mosquitoes and such.
Yes.
The way they control mosquitoes now when they spray, is that safe for us to be around? Like we use mosquito squad and get treated every 3 weeks in the perimeter of our property to keep the mosquito population down. And I know with triple E that they're, treating different areas of the country for that. The chemicals they use there, are they
Yeah,
safe?
the equine encephalitis.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's again a mosquito-borne disease. That's very true. But the important thing is, if you have a mosquito squad to come and treat, you are talking about several $100s per season. The way I do it, it's cost me $49 for about 10 years. I can tell you what to buy and how to apply yourself, but it's fairly safe. The material is used for dog and cats collars. So it's safe. The product is called Dominion 2L. You can buy from Do My Own Pest Control. And it's about, I think, $37 or $48 a bottle, 20-ounce bottle. You can dilute it down. It can last you about 10 years. Yes.
You're out of your yard?
Human hair. Yeah. Yeah, if you go for a haircut next time, get the hair together, put it in the bag and take it home and just put it around your, yeah. They don't like the smell. Another thing is Irish soap. No, not Irish soap, Irish Spring soap. Yeah, Irish Spring soap. It's not good. Yeah. But human hair probably would be a good one. The deer hunters, deer hunters use that for, I'm not sure for deer hunting, but sure to repel the deer from eating the vegetations. Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir.
Hello. I have special interest in the Bhopal
Yes.
accident because my very first trip to India ended in the mid-August of
Just hot time.
1984.
Just a few months
But
before
I
Bhopal.
never visited Bhopal except one time in 1999. I was on
Yeah.
an overnight train from Hyderabad to Delhi.
Hyderabad.
It's a
Oh.
long trip,
Yeah.
but it stopped for about 15 minutes in Bhopal. And I got off the train and did a little observance because I felt so badly for the Indians. So what I was hoping to hear today was something about the pitiful recompense and compensation.
The compensation was $480 million Union Carbide paid, but none of the inhabitants got any money. The government took it. The Indian government took it.
That explains a lot.
Yes. Yes. Is there any other questions? Anybody online have questions? No?
See, well, I have one, but what, looking back, what kind of lessons have been learned moving forward? Is there less corruption and greed in the industry or?
Corruption and greed is always going to be there. It's been there for thousands of years and will be there for thousands of years.
Yes. And this guy worked on nuclear subs.
So one of the things that I had to teach young engineers about the environmental laws and health and safety laws that we comply with within the nuclear program. But as a result of this accident, in 1986, Congress passed a law that was the Emergency Planning Community Right to Know Act. And what that law did was required companies, big companies, and the nuclear laboratories like us and all other big companies, they had to inventory the chemicals that they had on site, and they had to kind of like internally justify how much they had there and needed it. And they had to notify the public around them of what those chemicals were. And it's not like private secret information. There were some trade secrets you could protect, but in general, the local community would then know what the big company down the street had on site. And for us personally, like at our laboratories, we found out that we had several thousand gallons of hydrochloric acid in a tank. Then we're like, well, how much do we use every year? Oh, like 3 gallons. Well, why do we have 10,000 gallons on the site? Let's get rid of some of
Because
it.
it was
So
cheap.
you would reduce the risk to the public because of this law. It's a pretty good law. And it was a result of this.
Yes.
This was in 84 and that law was passed in 86.
Yeah, well, I think laws are good after the fact, but then there are criminals always finding different ways to do things. Another thing that I worry about is private investment companies. They come in to buy a chemical company or a producer of something, and then they run it to the ground. And at the same time, they pollute the environment. I'll give you a good example. There's, forgot the name of the company, but it's not far from Flint. This chemical company was making some components for Ford and was bought by a private investment company. When they came in, they took out all the people in important jobs like environmental people, environmental managers, safety managers, And then they put people with no background onto these positions. And the reason they got caught is because Michigan found out that there was some solid biomass used for animal feed in this farm called, I think, a Gossage farm in north of Brighton. They grow a lot of beef. They have it's a cattle farm, and he used biomass feed to cows. And then 2018, Snyder's government said, we're going to have to find out what's going on with this feed because we heard there were some problems with feeds. So they went in and investigated the ground of this farmer and said, well, you have PFAS in your ground. Can we take samples of the meat? So the farmer didn't know any better, gave the sample of meat to the state agency. They took it back. A few months later, they came in, they shut him down. He could not sell any of his meat, was citing PFAS level too high because he had PFAS in his biomass feed. So they traced it all the way to the place where they were supplying components for the Ford Motor Company. Turned out that they were putting waste with PFAS into the municipal waste. And can you imagine that? Is that the only farmer that got affected? I don't think so. So now you tell me, is that because of these private investment companies? All they care for is profit. They do it at the expense of everybody else's health. And I'll be talking about that topic, which is called Forever Chemical, in the summer of next year.
Okay, any other comments or questions for Wally? Okay, let's give Wally some thanks here for his presentation today.
Thank you.
And thanks to our online participants as well.
Thank you.
And if you leave the ink pens on the